occupied territories. Our speech, which was based on our commitment to independence and our commitment to non-alignment, clearly stated Zambia's abhorrence of this situation. It's repeating itself now 40 years on, and some of the elements of what is there were the same.
It remained the same. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly also indicate that when after 4 years in New York, I felt that it was time to move on to other challenges.
Yes.
Particularly then I sought a job in the United Nations Secretariat. So I was, fortunately, there were very few Zambians working in the UN Secretariat, unfortunately.
So when your tour of duty ended, you decided to stay in the US?
No, my work in the United Nations Secretariat took me to Nairobi.
Okay.
Where I was offered a position of senior program officer as the chief for environmental education and training for the whole UN system, based in Nairobi. And this included issues which we are dealing with now of climate change.
At the time.
At the time. But at the time, as you traveled in Africa, you appeared like you are coming from Mars. Many people in Africa didn't take this matter seriously. That led me later to leave. But let me just point out, just during this period, as is indicated in my other book, which is coming this year, The Zambian Professional on the World Stage, it shows clearly that I was really on a world stage working for the UN and traveling globally. Our program was connected with UNESCO, the scientific side of UNESCO. Then we had offices in Bangkok, Thailand, an office in Dresden, East Germany, an office in Mexico City, for the areas, for the regions. So I was, for most of the time, have to operate from those offices in order to promote environmental education and training. So I feel that, and fortunately for me, I think the General Assembly and the assemblies of the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, did recognize this contribution of promoting education and training. I then left after 4 years of work there. And by the way, we came to Zambia. We managed to persuade the head of the UNEP to come to Zambia, Dr. Tolba, in 1983. Meet with the president and ministers. Our interest was to see if Zambia could hook on to the idea of offering a watershed project management with environmental support, but on the Zambezi River. That's for another day. So after I left the UN in Nairobi, I was headhunted to become Deputy Director General of the Eastern and Southern African Management Institute. ESAMI, which is based in Arusha, Tanzania. 2 years later,
what does ESAMI do to our dear viewers, especially the young ones who may not know?
Right, the Eastern and Southern African Management Institute is the premier management development institution, or at least we made it so, in Africa. It provides top-level management, and initially, but later on, it provided even specialized management programs like in financial management and stores and all that. And the institution offered courses for these people, and hundreds of Zambians attended them. And hundreds of courses were held even in Zambia and elsewhere in the region. So this institution will be known by a number of our people, but to emphasize it, we even, myself personally, I decided to institute a program of promoting the management of public services by having courses, short-term courses for secretaries to cabinet of our region. I do recall at the time that we had the likes of Manyema, who is now late, and then Mr. Adamson, people like Dr. Sachika, Mr. Mbola, and of course I thank
this management program targeted those that run cabinet,
a few,
the secretary to cabinet.
So we would do that in order to ensure that the secretaries to cabinet were also in tune with what was being done by their support staff. I became head of that organization and was there for 2 terms.
Yeah,
And
like 2 terms.
Like Mutukwa, I did 2 terms and I left. The people who succeeded me removed the term limit, and some of them stayed there for 20 years. So this
at the time there was you had set up a term limit.
Yeah, term limits in the organization. So I left and then came back to Zambia. I think that portion, since I have this opportunity, I need to emphasize. Came back to Zambia, did some set up a consultancy firm. And I did...
You didn't go back to the University of Zambia?
No. I set up a consultancy firm which was training high-level persons throughout the provinces on civic education and civic management. So I went around the country, and also in addition, during this period, I was honored to have a consultancy to transform COMESA, to transform PTA, what was called Preferential Trade Area. To
COMESA?
To COMESA. And this monumental task was given to me by Dr. Mbingwa Mtarika, who was then Secretary General.
Yeah, the one who later became President of Malawi.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in fact, because COMESA was based in Zambia for a long time, Dr. Mbingwa Mtarika was here in Lusaka.
Indeed. So that's another milestone of what I did. But because of traveling around Zambia, and that was, I think, the Second Republic, this was 1993-94. I discovered that things were not going right, especially the infrastructure throughout most of the countries as we traveled, and a few other major concerns. So I decided that I was going to go into politics.
Wow.
So I joined politics in 1995.
At the advent of the multi-party state,
no.
In 1990-1991, you didn't participate. You were an academic and the profession.
No, I was then leading a SAMI.
Or in Tanzania.
I was out of the country,
okay.
But I followed, but I didn't participate in the establishment. But I followed the events.
Okay.
Then when I came back, then that's when I now decided I want to enter politics.
Okay. So you stood in Nalolo, I think, in 1996.
Indeed.
Was Nalolo Constituency still Nalolo, or was it named something else?
No, it was Nalolo.
Okay.
In fact, I think it will be 50 years this year. It was Nalolo Constituency. I joined the party called SADC. In fact, we formed it.
With Din Mwamba, Dr. Banda,
exactly,
and Mbita Chitala.
Yes.
You joined...
Not joining, literally we were involved. They were involved literally at the very beginning.
Okay.
I became vice president of SADC.
To Din Mwamba.
Yes, to Din Mwamba, in charge of policy development.
Yes.
Because there was a vice president also for gender and so on. So I participated in the campaign and mobilizing that party, which became the second largest party in the elections of 1996.
Yes, because you got boycotted.
Boycotted. We got 25% of the votes. And only me and my neighbor won seats. Only 2 out of 158 candidates.
Yes. Oh, you won on the SADC ticket.
On the SADC
in Nalolo.
In Nalolo.
And who was the second one?
Mr. Honorable Stumbeko. He won in Nalikwanda, which was a neighboring constituency to mine.
Okay.
So that was all. The rest of the country, we didn't win a
Which
seat.
Stumbeko?
No, this one called Albert Stumbeko.
Albert Stumbeko.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So we mobilized. I decided to stand in Nalolo, where I originated from, in order to plow back.
Did they vote for you because you're SADC, because you come from Nalolo and they know the family?
Principally, the family, my family was well known in Nalolo constituency. But also, I think I put in my best, not in terms of money, because those days money was not the most important, but I crisscrossed. I had 5 opponents. One of the opponents was the minister, a deputy minister at the State House, called Kavika.
He was defending his seat.
He was defending his seat. I was fortunate to defeat all of them on my first try.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank
you. You became a vibrant parliamentarian. I think you were very... you made issues of accountability very, very strong.
Absolutely.
In the National Assembly when you came...
Particularly, Ambassador, the question of accountability by the then government after the selling of almost 300 of our state-owned enterprises,
yes.
I asked questions on 10 different times, and it's there in the parliamentary records. And I believe that I never got a proper answer.
What were your questions?
My question was, where is the money for this? And why did we do it? Okay. Usually I got vague answers from the Minister of Finance in Parliament.
That, in fact, then brings me to... You served as MP for Nalolo
for 3 years.
And under ZADC for
yes.
3 years. Why not 5 years?
I resigned.
Why did you resign?
To take up this post of Secretary General of SADC. I realized then that really the space for participation, for democracy, for contribution was very limited. There were only 21 opposition members in Parliament.
At the time, because you boycotted, yes.
Yes. 5 were from National Party, 2 ZADC, and 2 what was called Agenda for Zambia. And then the rest were independents, the Bob Sichingas and others.
Yes.
They were independent MPs. So they were, I felt that really I'm not contributing. But also the other push factor was that our party decided to boycott Parliament after the elections. They said you should all resign your seats because, so it was, I was torn between what to do with the people who Nalolo elected me and what my party is saying. Now, the catch was my party wrote to the Speaker, but our constitution had no clause for expulsion. In fact, it was quite explicit. Because people formed ZADC mostly came from, they were expellees from their party.
It was a breakaway from
MMD.
From MMD, yes.
So they made sure that it was expulsion-proof party. So there was no basis for expelling anyone.
Okay, under ZADC.
Under ZADC. But in the end, after reviewing the situation, I said, I think I should go back to my international work where I felt I was making an impact like SAMI, where I was really involved in building an institution, consolidating an institution, and expanding it from about 6 members to 18 members.
Okay.
And mobilizing resources worldwide for it, including money from European Union, which we used to refurbish facilities there with $5 million US. It was not easy money in those days.
Yes.
So I said, I think I can make a better impact in regional organizations than what is happening in this Parliament. So that's when I applied.
It came as an advert or someone spoke to you about it?
It was an advert, and I was sitting in Parliament. Then 2 MPs, I think it was Kalifungwa and another one, came to me and said, we've seen an advert.
Patrick Kalifungwa.
We've seen an advert which we think you are the most suitable candidate for. We've read the profile. I took it, went consult my family, we agreed, let's go for it. So I applied, there were 100 people from Zambia who applied, but regionally there were about 400 from SADC countries. We were interviewed, 8 of us in Harare, and I was selected as the #1 person to take up this post, to become the first Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum.
This is where this book comes from.
Absolutely.
The rise and role of the SADC Parliamentary Forum in addressing regional issues. Because SADC had now transformed. After all countries in Southern Africa became independent,
right.
SADC had to transition from, it was frontline state, now to SADC, so that it was a regional body that was more developmental, more focused on peace and security.
And development.
Yes, and development, yes. On this book, what does it say briefly?
What it says is that when SADC was transformed, SADCC, you remember that, 1980?
Yes. So SADC with 2 double C's.
And by the way, it was established here in Zambia, thanks to President Kaunda and his magic appeal, charismatic appeal and the respect that came from Africa and from the region. It was established here. Then in 1992, shortly after Namibia's independence, it became the constitution of the SADCC was transformed into SADC with a 1C. But in the articles of establishing SADC, they did not provide sufficient space for the participation of parliaments. You may know that in many countries, like in regions like in ECOWAS, they do have a parliamentary body, ECOWAS Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly, and so on. But in the case of SADC, there was no provision for the parliament, for a parliamentary forum. There was provision for a tribunal and provision for, of course, the executive, but no legislature. That's why then the speakers of parliament, the representatives of parliament, decided to form the Southern African Development Community Parliamentary Forum. It had been in existence literally as a law-lying operation for 2-3 years until I was elected to become its Secretary General at a conference that was held in Arusha, Tanzania in 1999. So my responsibility then was to build an institution. There was plenty of money for the organization. Of course, we didn't touch it. My ethics came from the village where I knew that public things are public assets. You don't play with them. So I then set out in consultation with parliaments. And there are 15 parliaments, by the way, and 4,000 members of parliament whose work I was coordinating. By the way, just for the information of those who may not know. The biggest parliament in SADC is DRC with 600 MPs. South Africa has 400 MPs. Zambia has 150. This is an average. Otherwise, the Angolas, Malawi, they have 200 MPs. Namibia, Botswana are among the smallest with less than 100.
Wow.
So these are the people then I was to coordinate and provide now programs. One of the flagship programs we did was to engage in promoting democratic participation in our region. So we set out to observe elections. And I got quite a lot of money from different sources, mobilize that resource.
So the SADC Observer missions that we see now, you are the one that crafted them?
No, the ones you see now, most of them are from the executive side.
Okay.
The executive had their own, but then the SADC Parliamentary Forum argued that as products of parliament, of elections, MPs were in the best position because the ones who come from the SADC executive would be civil servants, security people, judges, and so on. Whereas from the parliament, the people who used to be constituting these teams were parliamentarians. So my job as Secretary General was to coordinate the participation and prepare documentation for them, training manuals, and then study what is going on. So it gave me a good opportunity to know what was going on in each of the countries of SADC by the time we completed this. We came to Zambia and observed the elections from 2001.
Yes.
So I'll say one or two things about that later.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's do the transition. I think we've covered your life. We've seen your education from University of Zambia right up to PhD when you know it was done in the US. We've covered your professional life at the University of Zambia, your professional life as a consultant who even consulted on the transition for PTA to COMESA. We've seen your life now as a parliamentarian where you tried to be a politician and went into opposition politics in 1996. You served 3 years in parliament and then you went to do this pioneering role at SADC Parliamentary Forum. I think we are ripe for these questions. We are 60 as a country. What have we done right? What could we have done better? Let's start with a review of our presidents, their economic and other policies for our country. What could they have done well? What could they have done better? Why are we where we are? Let's start with our founding father, Dr. Kenneth David Kaunda.
Ambassador, I would like to start off with a slightly different tint.
Yes.
That is the conceptual framework which we should use so that we end up comparing apples with apples, not apples with the oranges.
Correct.
And be sure that we appreciate where Africa came from. Africans, or the people, including Zambian freedom fighters, they fought for independence for a purpose. And when we won independence, it was understood that two major factors will guide our work in Africa and our being. This was political independence which included nation building and all other nationalism, patriotism, other isms which we can refer to later, including the values that include the commitment to service before self. The second component was that of economic independence. Should Africa be independent and become just a vessel for other people to enjoy the benefits of our independence, our land, our minerals? The answer was no. The basis of economic independence was to make sure that Zambians own their land, foreigners could lease the land, but not owning it. They lease it. If you want to invest, you can lease maybe for 10 years, 20 years. When your lease is over, it reverts to Zambians because land is infinite. It cannot be parceled out. The economic component was to a strategy to ensure that Zambians had mastery over, they controlled the economy. And this was done. Now I'm coming to what the question you were asking. But maybe before I go there, let me point out that at independence, the political independence we are talking about, it was expected that Zambia will be bigger. I hear this from time to time. Zambia bigger than
all of us.
Than all of us. What it means is that we are Zambians first, or we should be Zambians first. And everybody else will not be at the same level of enjoying what is Zambian. And therefore, but unfortunately, in my analysis, I noticed that the issue of being Zambians first is being compromised by one major characteristic, which unfortunately has been a matter of degree since independence. That is the partisan approach, where the party and its government syndrome. The party becomes the superior institution to the government, and the government then relies on its cadres, on persons that they know, and ends up in a situation where, say starting from 1991, we were paging the public service. So we have to avoid a situation where in independent Zambia, which belongs to all of us, you have to wait 5 years until the other party goes, or 10 years. That's when the rest of the other Zambians will be able to. I think that is the wrong way of proceeding. One of the challenges which we have is that it has led to, I don't know if I have a better word, trashing of continuity.
Yeah.
What has been built up by the government of Zambia, I hope that people understand there's something called GRZ, Government of the Republic of Zambia. Not necessarily government of His Excellency, since independence. It's supposed to be government of the Republic of Zambia. And that government of the Republic of Zambia is a continuing institution, regardless of party. So whatever is built in its name belongs to Zambia, belongs to Zambians. So that we should, if we had maintained continuity, we did not sell off our assets. We maintained continuity and ensured that Zambian professionals, who are many now, from the diaspora, when they get back, or those who are in the diaspora, and those who are in the country, participate actively in building the country. And we do not marginalize them because you suspect that they don't belong to your party. The party should come second after you have dealt with the Zambian populace. Not all Zambians belong to a party, and they've never done, even since the days of UNIP. So since not all Zambia, the party is a partisan program. And we have to understand this. Otherwise, we will really be lost in our attempt to become a country that is prosperous. Zambia has now moved from middle income to one of the poorest countries in Africa. Is this something we should be proud of? Or celebrated HIPIC somewhere in the middle? Of course, that was removing. So in essence, I'm saying, let us assess all our presidents and all their governments from the perspective of political independence. The UNIP government definitely did a great deal to fathom values of political independence. This included placing Zambia as a non-aligned country.
As a major foreign policy.
As our major foreign policy. Supporting independence, not only independence of Zambia, but the independence of the then neighboring states, but also Africa as a whole and the world as a whole. I mentioned our view towards Palestine then. It was in the context that there should be no occupying powers anywhere in the world, as is happening today.
Yeah, including East Timor, we
Absolutely.
were very
we played a role in that.
Uniform view about Palestine and even East Timor.
So that is the pattern. So political independence meant that we were to be free people who would decide on our... indeed, this is one particular area which has faltered throughout the 60 years of independence. It has been ups and downs of observing political rights, observing human, notwithstanding that our constitutions have forever stated that there will be freedoms and respect for gender equality, for non-discrimination and so on, and political participation. But over time, it has been like a seesaw. Today you have it, tomorrow you don't have it. So what I'm suggesting in terms of analysis is then to go through all the various governments we have had. How far have we gone?
So with Dr. Kaunda, he probably must have achieved the values he wanted for our independence. What about the economy?
The economy also, he did achieve the ownership, the issue of making Zambians the owners of their resources, particularly the mines. He therefore took on, some of us refer to it as nationalization, others say it was a majority stake, 51% shares in the mines which were then in existence from Anglo-American MX. These, in the Matero Declaration and Murungushi reforms, Zambia took over the ownership of these assets. And they were run by Zambians for Zambians. And we had even the marketing of these institutions, like they set up a marketing outlet called MEMACO, Metal Marketing Corporation, which was based in, I think partly in Dar es Salaam and then in London. But we also had, we were members of CPEC, which was people of the South who got together, countries of the South who got together to be able to promote their independence in governing their minerals. Unfortunately, that scheme did not survive long, especially with the privatizations. So that was the Kaunda era. He was able to produce 300 or more parastatals, state-owned enterprises, all of which were sold under pressure from the IMF and the World Bank by the MMD government when it came to...
You were privileged to have sat on the Chona Commission that then, did a draft constitution that turned our country from a multi-party state since 1964 to a one-party state in 1973. What do you think that did to our country? Do you find that the one-party state did harm? Or like you are saying, we should understand it in the times of the period? In the times of the period, I mean, at this time, most of African countries were going one party because it was felt that, rightly or wrongly, I think more on the wrong, it was felt that, because it would have been better if there was a referendum to be able to decide on whether you want to go one party or multi-party, rather than have it as an imposition, which it appeared to be, or what it was in reality. I think that was the catch. And the one-party state delivered on the promotion of peace, development, and security. But it did not deliver well on the observance of human rights because there were provisions there for detentions without trial for a number of months. In fact, I remember it being extended from 1 month to 6 months. That was not appropriate. But again, unfortunately, this was borrowed from the colonial practices. Remember the Public Order Act,
was from 1955 when the colonial rulers wanted to control the resurgence of African political activity. So unfortunately, many governments did not change that. We are to, even as we speak today, the Public Order Act is either misused or misplaced, and not much has been done to revisit this. Now, my appeal is, we are 60. We can't continue. We have to get some of the things that have not worked to be set aside and move Zambia to a platform where we can have pillars of how we are going to develop together, not developing because by one party or one person. It's not possible. So that is the direction one sees so the one-party state had many minuses, but for peace and security, it was able to. For economy, there can be balance of forces on whether or not the parastatals fail. But remember, we had one of the offshoots of that period of the Kaunda era of the 27 years was to train a lot of Zambians in professions. Because Zambia had only 100 graduates at independence, plus 1,000 people with the was it grade 12, what is called now?
Yes, Form 5 at the time.
Right. So that training of so many Zambians gave us confidence. We seem to be losing that confidence. We've been seeming to be losing that confidence over time. And began to think that we need to look outside Zambia for the salvation of our economy, for people to come and do things for us. That can never work. No country has grown their economies or their being by depending or looking only to the others. Remember, there is a book by our daughter, Dambisa Moyo, on dead aid. Money has been poured into most of Africa. Where is it? How far are we with the development? So some of these models, we've really got to relook them and make sure that we don't follow paths that do not provide dividends for us. So this is the catch we have. Now the Kaunda administration also, one point which I wanted to remember was about, for example, in areas like agriculture. They introduced nitrogen chemicals, which was later privatized, and I don't know what ever happened. They introduced NAMBOD to deal with marketing of agriculture products, and many other sectors of the economy, almost all sectors, including the airline. We, Zambia, by 1994, when they privatized Zambia Airways, we were proud people. It was being flown by Zambian pilots, captains and all. Captain Lazaro, Murundika, to remember a few. And by that time, we had a DC-10, that is McDouglas 10. It was carrying 300 passengers from Lusaka to Monrovia and then New York and back, about 3 times a week. Later, we privatized. What did we see? They brought some planes, some of which didn't even have toilets. You have to go to the toilet before you board a plane. So we underrated ourselves. The assets of this Zambia Airways are numerous, from London, Rome, Brussels, Nairobi. I asked that question in Parliament several times. Where is the money that we collected from these assets?
And they couldn't give you the...
No, I couldn't get a proper answer. To date, I don't have a proper answer as to what happened to the privatization.
The government of Frederick Chiluba, like you had highlighted, he was ZCTU president. At their December conference in 1989, the Congress decides that Zambia, one of the resolutions, should go back to multi-party state.
Right.
And academic from a research center, I think, arise and they put together a conference 6 months later,
right.
the famous Garden, which then birthed the movement for multi-party democracy. And we under international and local pressure, Dr. Kaunda yields, calls for fresh elections, and he loses that elections to Dr. Chiluba. That period that followed of 10 years, I think, becomes momentous, especially on economic policy. Like you said, we now abandoned state-owned enterprises, most of them. We abandoned our socialist approach to our economy. We became more a liberal economy. Just reflect on Dr. Chiluba's tenure in office.
The tenure in office, by the way, just a footnote there.
Yeah.
The Kiona Commission recommended a term limit for years.
It put a term limit?
It put a term limit of 10 years. We said we are not going to backdate this. But from this point on, that was 1973, the future president of Zambia should serve for only 2 terms.
Wow.
It was rejected.
If Dr. Kaunda and his government had followed that, probably UNIP would still be in power up to now.
So, like what is happening in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was rejected alongside a number of other progressive recommendations. Now, coming to the Chiluba era, there were areas of freedoms that were allowed to a large extent. But I noticed by that time I came back and participated in politics. We discovered that freedom after speech was not guaranteed. You were told you are free to speak, but after speaking, then what happens? I think you know this better than me, Ambassador.
Yes.
So the Chiluba era provided, like any change, an aura of difference, particularly for the young people, that it will be different. But the biggest shortfall was the arrangement of selling state enterprises under pressure from whoever. It was not right to sell the family silver. And in some cases, really, you don't sell a family silver. There were supposed to be other options, or maybe you select. The success areas for the Chiluba era was in the area of transport, I recall, liberalizing transport, because you could wait for UBZ forever. But now almost everyone could run there. Then there was a program of giving houses. What was it called? Yeah,
the housing policy, which created PHI and also council and state-owned enterprises houses were sold to sitting tenants.
Right. At least that gave some bit of relief. The only shortcoming of that scheme was that we did not plan ahead to provide more housing. Hence, the mushrooming of unplanned settlements and the increase of urban poverty, which must be looked into very seriously because this is a time bomb. So this is the kind of thing that, apart from that, Zambia certainly was ostracized because on some situations because of the harsh treatment that was meted out against the former president. And this approach...
Or Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, he was arrested in 1996 and before that was subjected to some form of investigations.
Yes, it was on Christmas Day in 1996 he was arrested. And incessant investigations, as it happened later to President Chiluba, as happened later to President Rupia Banda, as happened later
to Edgar Lungu.
And this scenario does not build a village. We need to get away from it. We need to learn to work together as Zambians. If we have differences, let's find a way of amicably addressing this.
And one of the biggest achievements in Dr. Chiluba's government, I think, was a commitment for debt restructuring, where there was a promise of total debt write-off. I think, of course, that then becomes and is achieved in the subsequent government of the MMD of Levi Mwanawasa.
Yes, indeed.
For Chiluba, I think he had achieved, but not the completion point, but he had reached that point where they could then consider the debt write-off. So what are your reflections of Mwanawasa? Mwanawasa, there's 10 years of Chiluba's government. State-owned enterprises, the bulk of them have been sold. He also sold one or two, especially Zanaco, and I can't remember others, but put together Zesco, because Zesco, there were two major companies. But he seems to roll back on these liberal policies and reintroduces subsidies in agriculture. What are your reflections of President Mwanawasa?
Ambassador, allow me to fall back a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is I am almost completing writing a book.
Wow.
Whose title is The State of the Governance of Zambia at 60 and Beyond.
Okay.
From KK to HH.
Wow. So you are doing something similar to what I'm asking you to.
Yes, indeed. So I just want I don't want to lose this opportunity.
Yes.
From indicating that much as I would like to run through the presidents, I want to indicate some few challenges that we must address. Correct. Because I don't hear them being addressed by many people. One of the biggest challenges Zambia faces is about its constitution, regardless of these presidents we're talking about. Our constitution is faulty. It is not responding to Zambia's principal values. Does our constitution guarantee political independence and all its variables, including nation building, unity? What are the pillars of unity? Are we agreed on what constitutes unity? What about democracy, which is punctuated through all the constitutions we have? All those things don't come through. We don't seem to have a consensus in Zambia on what constitutes a democracy. What is also very, very troubling about the constitution of Zambia, as it is present, is not only lacunas, it's a fundamental flaw, fatal flaw. The constitution does not relate well with the values. It does not promote the values. For example, the constitution of Zambia since independence has given all powers of the executive to the president. Whether it was President Kaunda, President Munawasa, and so on. They all had the same powers, and nothing has changed. And as long as there is no change in the method, in the manner in which we democratize our society. For example, I want to give you one example. To what extent or rather my question, to what extent does the Constitution guarantee the participation of the youth? Hardly anywhere. And yet, if we transform all our institutions, we will find that we create space for the youth. In Parliament, for example, we have to find a way in which you would say maybe half of the MPs must be youth, so that the youth begin to sit at the table of where decisions are made, from top to bottom. That is not happening. And that is really, to me, one of the most critical challenges that we face. I would also say that the powers of the president, as it is today, he appoints almost everyone from vice president to a DC. Even in institutions that are supposed to be independent of the president, such as the judiciary and the parliament, some of the appointments come from State House for these positions. Should this not be reviewed? And even the method of amending the constitution, by the way. I get surprised in Zambia. I hear people, we are asking the government, including some MPs, to review the constitution. Why don't we find a mechanism such as a certain percentage of parliamentarians, like a third, like you do with impeachment, can propose to amend the constitution and they call for maybe a 2/3 majority of parliamentarians? How can we have an institution like parliament? You know what we have been having since independence, except during the Munawasa era where there was a bit of balance. We have had a one-party parliament, literally. In other words, the party in power almost can move whatever they want and get through with it. It passes. Why don't we reconstitute our parliament to make it more inclusive so that in addition to the political party representatives, like they are doing in most study countries now, there's proportionate representative of women, of youth, people with differently abled and so on. These are some of the critical things which we must address. And they run across all governments. Therefore, it's extremely important that we revisit this. For example, now, if I ask Ambassador to comment, that for many of us Zambians, for many Zambians, how can you become, for example, a member of the board of a Bank of Zambia? How? You have to be political. There's something, vocabulary now, politically connected. You have to be, what is the other word? A cadre or something like that. You have to be associated with the politicians. Is it not time that all commissions and the boards were opened up for advertising, so that every eligible Zambian, including the Electoral Commission, this is being done in many countries, so that any Zambian, remember we said Zambians are above politics.
Yeah.
All right? So why not, this is now professional things that are being done. If we don't deal with it now, somebody could ask, why now? Why now? Because we are 60. These are issues to discuss at the age of 60. It's a pity that at 50, nobody picked these up, but it's time that we reflected on these as we move forward. And it will be an honor if the present government were to leave this subject open so that the whole constitution can be reviewed. It's not just a cut and paste situation or dots and commas and lacunas. No, it's a fundamental issue. Even our own independence is being compromised in the preamble to the current constitution of 2016. By the way, we have had 6 electoral commissions, 6 constitutional review commissions in this country. The problem with them, which is now a problem with the constitution, is that they've always been appointed by the executive. The reports are given to, their recommendations are given to the executive. The executive decides on what to accept and what not. So it has become a partisan constitution right across, with a few modifications.
The constitutional making process, and I'm glad that you've identified it as one of the most powerful issues that we have to deal with.
Right.
Like you are saying, it has degenerated to a partisan affair.
Right.
In 1996, the government of President Frederick Chiluba, the cabinet, in its white paper, rejected most of the clauses that came from the Mwanakatwe Constitution Review recommendations. And by bully of the numbers in Parliament, that constitution was passed.
Right.
We saw later attempts by Mwanawasa and especially Rupia Banda,
right,
whose document finally succeeded to go to Parliament.
Right.
But it became a partisan document.
Right.
UPND sabotaged it,
right,
didn't vote for it. And the only one that succeeded was the 2016 one. Even it succeeded because there was one fundamental decision that cabinet should not touch any of the documents that were at draft level approved.
Mm-hmm.
But it passed, like you are saying, we still have a lot of inadequacies because it still allocates a lot of presidential powers to one man. Currently, there's now a debate for us to go back to the issues of the Constitution, and now there are split views. Others think that maybe we allow this Constitution to run its course, if there is such a thing. Others are saying, no, it's impeding on our democracy, let us go for it. The third one are saying, no, but you can't trust this government to amend the Constitution. What is it that they want to include? So the issues of the Constitution remain a matter of serious worry.
The other big thing about the Constitution is that we don't seem to have established the system, institutions and the systems. We are depending on individuals and individual mess. Even in issues of transition from one government to another, it is very shaky. We may say that we are enjoying peace today, but you remember, you have been around, ambassador like me. Almost each time there was a transfer of power, we were on edge. Because we don't have a system that is foolproof. All people go to courts, continuous court petitions. That has been the pattern. Now, is this telling us that the Constitution is well and good? Apart from that, then of course the issue of people's welfare. How much does this Constitution respond to the needs of the women, whose pace and space of movement is taking forever? How much of this Constitution is responding to the needs of the youth who are excluded from decision-making areas? They have to know somebody. How many youths need to know me or know somebody else for them to access? And the situation also of marginalization.
Did you know anyone to get the opportunities you got in your life?
No, I did not know. It was just my work which spoke for me. But from all the way, including getting scholarships, getting jobs where I did, most of it, in fact, was applications for these jobs as I indicated. So we grew up in a situation where we knew this would be, it was a bit better at that time, but it's getting worse and worse, particularly situations we are facing now where we are not looking at Zambia as a whole, but we are looking at groups of people. And this does not augur very well. So I'm emphasizing that it's time. It's not because of anyone. Yes, if one wishes, you can say, well, the term in any case is halfway through, but you can begin the process of reviewing, and I've been hearing also even the present government making areas, for example, like by-elections. You can have an electoral system, and I've studied electoral systems in SADC and worldwide, where they don't have by-elections, which are divisive and costly. The high cost of money in elections needs to be addressed. Perhaps we may not need the first past the post, we need a different mode. These are some of the violence during elections. A winner take all, and everybody to depend on the welfare on the state, which does not even have resources. These can be addressed so that the economy can expand, and the economy will expand if Zambians are the leaders of the economy. I mean, we have to have a situation where we are now in a position where 90%, I'm told by economists, of the economy is in the hands of multinationals, including banks. We have only one bank, but which is also controlled from outside as well, Zanaco. The others are dying off like this recent one. Now, where will Zambians get capital for them to be able to finance their projects? In fact, most of the time you find that capital goes to those who are
already wealthy,
who are well to do. In fact, my point on this is that for Zambians who are supposed to be condemned to micro, small, and medium enterprises, who should own the large ones?
It's foreign nationals.
It's foreign nationals. And those foreign nationals don't come here by magic or because they are cleverer than us. It's because they come here, their government or their institutions, interest rates are low. And here in Zambia forever. Man, these are the issues which need to be addressed and which are standing in the way of our future development. For us to move from a middle-income country to a poor country, it's not something we should be proud of.
That regression, yes.
Look at Zimbabwe, for example, maybe my last point on this. In the telecommunication, a Zimbabwean owns the major telecommunications system, I think, which will be equivalent to what here?
To like Zamtel.
Like Zamtel. No, not like Zamtel. Like,
or like Airtel
exactly.
Or MTN. Yeah.
Until recently, Zambians were only specializing in selling talk time on the street. Is that the kind of development you expect? So these are issues which require us to endeavor.
Let me, from the perspective you've given me, where you want to judge not personalities at head office, but the principles that you think must drive that question, probably we just jump straight. We are 60. We are, Zambia is now 60. We are one of the wealthiest countries at independence. And like you've just said, we've now regressed. We are among the 20 poorest countries, and our poverty levels, I think, have risen now to 60%, prevalence at national levels. We are not doing very well. What should we do better in the next 60 years, beginning now?
What we should do better is to move...
You've tackled the issue of the Constitution.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that becomes paramount, we'll address it. What other things can we do?
By the way, I was defining the Constitution as the supreme law of the land on which governance
should be anchored.
Should be anchored. So the legal aspect and the governance aspect need to be addressed to achieve what we need to achieve. What else needs to be done? I think we literally need to go to the drawing board beyond the Constitution to a point where we would dialogue among ourselves. There's enough professionalism in Zambia. And I urge those who are listening, that even those in government, Zambians, for a political party, Zambia is its constituency. It shouldn't be individuals and then you leave the rest there. It appears like in a number of situations that persons with knowledge, if you are not a card carrier of a political party, you cannot even make a contribution. Unless we can consult well, because we have a wealth of knowledge. We have mining engineers in this country. We have persons who have expertise in the areas of our natural resources. And the people with the decisions, by the way, we should need to relook the recommendations of the Constitutional Review Commissions, all of them. Bring them up. In fact, you probably don't need a new one. You need to take out from there and see what works and what should not work. So we need to bring those things up and revisit our model of development. Presently, we are leaving the model of development to each party that comes in. Part of the constitution should be to tie some of the hands. Like, for example, you can't sell this without a referendum, or you can't do this without 2/3 majority in parliament. I think that provision, I hear about it, but whether it's being implemented, I don't know. Maybe those in parliament will be able to. So we can, the biggest thing also we should do is to look at what is the lowest hanging fruit for Zambia. Everybody knows. It's the minerals we have in this country, and there are minerals everywhere, but we are not benefiting.
Are we handling the mining sector properly?
No.
What should we do?
I cannot prescribe fully to what should be done, but the fundamentals should guide us. There has to be our right as Zambians to make the mines subscribe to our being. But more importantly, the ownership of the mines needs to be looked at to ensure that Zambian people have a stake in the mines. But also even in the method of selling some of the minerals we have. It should be transparent. It should be maybe a commission could be there, or not a commission, sorry, something like where we were with Memako, where we are able to sell our sugilite, where we are able to sell our... The Senegalese found our mines in the, is it Rufanyama? In
yes.
These places. They built a place which is called Zambia in Dakar. We, the owners of this, and especially those even in the surrounding areas, don't benefit from this. Why? So we have to relook this. It is not a matter of ideology or whatever. It's a matter of the rights of the Zambians. In some countries, the whole issue, for example, of mining. How many mines do Zambians own in the 100 years of mining in this country?
Oh, we do token issues. We pretend to give Zambians licenses for emeralds, for gold, for copper mines, but we provide no capacity for them. We provide no financial resources. In effect, those licenses are a pretense, because the only thing a Zambian maybe can do is to sell that license.
Precisely.
And also the sizes are very small. For foreigners, we give them large portions for explorations, or we give them the large-scale mines. And for Zambians, we give them these small mines that may not even be commercially viable. So we pretend to be supporting Zambians, when in fact it has demonstrated that we shouldn't. What should be the role, for example, of ZCCMIH in the mining sector? Should we revert to its previous role of ZCCM?
It would have been ideal, but I'm not quite sure whether at this stage that is a feasibility. But I wanted also to move to the issue of other resources like agriculture. Land, Zambia, only 15% of the land in Zambia is being utilized fully. Where is the rest? What are we doing? If a youth wants to have a piece of land, how do they get it? We need to have an endeavor with the traditional leaders to revisit the whole issue of land and how land is allocated, and to Zambians first, so that Zambians can cultivate this land, especially in those areas of Zambia which are now arable, which are now favored by weather condition rainfall, so that we move ourselves to a position where people are able to cultivate anywhere. You have these, what do they call them? Farm blocks?
Farming blocks, yes. We've set up to 1 million hectares in each province of farming blocks. I think since 2011, 2012. I think the process started under Levi Mwanawasa, I think in 2007. The trouble is that we have not taken water, we have not taken roads, we've not taken electricity to these huge farm blocks. And therefore, they remain a pipe dream. We can't exploit the opportunities, for them to drive our farming opportunities. We are well endowed with water resources, especially in the northern part of this country. I hear some statements about wanting to utilize that resource, but as you are saying, a strategy must be put in place to ensure that we even know exactly what we are going to harvest. For example, if we decided, like we did, there was a time I was involved with CEC,
that we decided that we are going to fund the fishing sector, so that Zambia at the time was only having 40%. I think now we are almost self-sufficient with fish. So you can pick up these sectors, cattle, livestock, we can move, game, what we harvest from our timber. All these are low-hanging fruits which we can utilize. Agriculture, indeed, but agriculture is more spoken about than the reality of achieving what should be. And we can't, as a country, one of the elements that should guarantee us, one of the pillars of our security and peace, is food security. We can, if we are self-sufficient with food, you can do whatever you like in some cases. And people will be there, they know that they can feed themselves. That is and we will need to hear more and more of that trajectory of moving in that direction.
Yeah, Dr. Mutukwa, I think you've given you good reflections. I'll come briefly to the social issues. You have a very famous sister, Woinonge Mutukwa, who was married to a very famous politician, Bo Arthur winner, and who herself became the first female vice president. You are uniquely distinguished in your own path, but our people may not know that the two of you are sisters from large families. How have you interacted with these successes with your sister?
My sister has been literally a mother to me since our parents departed, and looked after me, especially when I came to Lusaka for school and beyond. And very proud of her, very kind-hearted lady. It was a pride when she became first female vice president of the Republic of Zambia. And we were very happy about that as a family. And of course, I'm sure many other people. So we benefited a great deal. In fact, she and her husband provided a role model. They were in America at the time when I was still in secondary school. So I started to hear about America then. And when Mr. Winner was called prematurely to come and be a candidate in Barroso East constituency, or the districts on the east part of the Zambezi, in 1962 elections, I was in Mungu. So we were in fact participating as youth. So he became a role model in more ways than one. And of course he went to the University of California at Los Angeles, where he wanted to do his PhD and then was recalled to come. I also maybe lent a word something from that, that when I finished my work at home, I had to go to do my PhD without waiting for what would happen. So it has been quite most pleasant, one of the most pleasant aspects of our life. She's an elder sister, and there were 8 of us. There are now only 5 of us who are still on this earth.
No, she's remarkable. I hope that she'll come to the podcast in her own right and as soon as possible. Your spouse is also distinguished in the women's movement.
Yes, indeed. My spouse, Gladys Msozi Mutukwa, is very distinguished. She was one of the earliest women who petitioned the Kaunda in 1970.
Yeah.
On a gender issue with her, Sarah Longwe, I think Dr. Muntemba. President Kaunda had appointed a man to become Minister of Gender Affairs, Ali Simbole. So these 4 people went to State House with a lot of threats from the youth to go and petition that it was not appropriate.
Because they were among the first educated women.
Yes. She was in the second group of lawyers at the University of Zambia. So she graduated and was later on, one of the early women lawyers, except she devoted her time to women's rights. She didn't go into the bench and so on. So she, at one stage, after I think the time of the MMD, she was the chairperson of the Women's Lobby Group and was involved in setting up, as a consultant, in setting up the women's gender machineries. And they participated in virtually all the major events of those time. You remember Beijing,
yes, Beijing
Dakar, and so on,
Dakar
Nairobi. She was among those who were leading that movement and the women's movement. She became chairperson of All Africa World of Women in Law and Development in Africa. And she has done quite a lot of work, and I supported her in this endeavor of ensuring that women's rights are. By the way, that's also one of the incomplete agendas which should be looked at, because there is a provision for women's missionaries in the Constitution, like a commission on the status of women, but it's not being implemented since 2016 by the government. So those are some of the issues. But she is.
They were pioneers in gender agenda and in allowing and ensuring that we have women at the table in decision making, and that women were treated better at law, and that the cultural issues that impede women to succeed in relation to education and professional life, that they were identified and condemned. So she's also distinguished in her own right, and I hope that she could come to the podcast. We discuss that part of her life. So we've done 60 years and 60 years forward. What are your views as we begin to conclude?
My views as I begin to conclude is that we should preserve the values that were bequeathed to us as Zambians and as leaders, especially by Dr. Kaunda and his team. Values of sacrifice, values of abhorring corruption, values of and being serious with the issues of corruption. Yeah. There was a leadership code in Kaunda's time which required people to declare assets and all this. And it's extremely important that we, those values, the values of political independence, the values of economic independence. And
why haven't we moved to economic independence? Political independence we achieved 60 years ago.
Yeah, economic independence, we almost...
Why is it eluding us?
It didn't. It started during the Kaunda era with the privatization and the industrialization, the beginning of industrialization. Remember, Zambia...
The nationalization, sorry.
The nationalization and industrialization, the fact that we could manufacture blankets, tinning... what is it? Pineapples
and pineapples.
Yes, mango in Mongo, and throughout, and these were distributed throughout the country. A lot of industries were there. If we had kept some of those, we would have gone very far by now. This is where I was talking against demolishing public services, demolishing projects. Every project, I remember even Tazara, which was a mega project under Kaunda's time. It suffered a lot under MMD because they saw it. In fact, it was referred to as a UNIP project. And yet, this was a project for Zambia to escape and to provide new opportunities, to escape the wrath of the South, but also to build new opportunities. How do you not concentrate on projects like that just because it was built ideologically? These are projects built by your government, and the government must continue. So we started that trajectory. I don't want to repeat this, but I want to say that to move forward, we need to find each other. We need harmony. We need to define and agree through the Constitution on how Zambians can access so much that is presently is subject to appointments. How can they access them through advertising or through methods that can be open, especially to the youth? How do we ensure that the youth are at the table where decisions are being made?
Zambia, like most parts of Africa, has what we now call the youth bulge. We have a large number of young people. Our population is literally made of young people. Zambia's population statistics show that the largest number of our population is young people, but yet they're excluded from our economy. They're excluded from opportunities. And I see your passion in referring to young people, because many people may not realize that when you exclude such a large portion of the population from national development, they become a risk to your national security. We need to involve them and to bring programs that are focused on young people. By the way, they are the largest in the population. And also women, who we keep in the margins. Just what are your views about these young people you keep on referring to?
I believe that young people should be given a place at the table, at decision-making positions, in boards of directors, parliament. Many of these institutions that we have, and also even in our investors, we should encourage them to ensure that they give apprenticeship to as many of our people as possible to learn. But also to think more about technical training, technical and vocational training. We are overproducing in universities, both the public and private. Perhaps that might be the way to go, to provide skills for innovation, incubators for innovation, for the young people in colleges, in polytechnics, and of course in some of these ongoing skills development centers. Presently, I don't believe that the debate should be about how many more universities. That would be something that would have been done a long time ago. By the way, I always say, if what Kaunda and his team did in the first 27 years was replicated by each of these governments, be it infrastructure, industrialization, the ownership of assets and confidence of Zambians, where would we be today? That's why I'm saying the only way to get out of this quandary is to be able to have some review of our practices. And no one should be in a position to trash our constitution. I think we must be in a position where our constitution provides us the guidance to achieve what we need to achieve.
Thank you very much. To our dear viewers who were covering Dr. Kasuka Simwinji Mutukwa, is a prolific writer. He has written these two beautiful books, The Birth, Rise and the Role of SADC Parliamentary Forum in Addressing Regional Issues. And another one, and I didn't give him much time to discuss it, Origins of Africa's Relations with China, and the case of the Tanzania-Zambia Railway Project. This project was touted as the biggest project after the Second World War. It was one of the biggest infrastructure development projects, and it was done for Zambia. He's currently writing more books. He's written some books before. He was a parliamentarian, he's an academic. He has achieved so many things in his life, and he's the one we're profiling today, and for him to give us his reflections of the last 60 years and the next 60 years. And you have heard his emphasis on issues of the Constitution, issues of national building, issues of industrialization, and issues that should build our country. So until we have another guest, thank you for watching, and thank you for being with me with Dr. Kasuka Simwinji Mutukwa, who I was conversing with on the Conversation podcast. God bless you. God bless our country. Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.